The Elden Ring Network Test came to an end 3 months ago, and I'm still reeling from its tremendous quality. After my initial run in the early media build, I was even more impressed that a mere demo held 5 whole bosses and mini-bosses. Turns out my geographically challenged sense of direction failed my all bosses video, with that being more of an appetizer to the 9 more bosses that I missed, for a total of 14 in a demo build. I'm sweating bullets dreaming of how large the buffet of bosses will be in the final release. Before we sink our teeth in the coming weeks, I'm serving up a preliminary ranking of the 14 aforementioned battles I played back in the public network test. Yes, I have indeed been sitting on this video for months like Smog, with it behind a glass case thinking I'll smash this when the Elden Ring hype reaches its peak. Rather than a strict ranking with these fights subject to change so soon, I'll be grading each battle in tiers from F to A grades with a maximum of S in both quality and difficulty. Since this is a preview, I'll also be sharing full footage of each fight using a variety of builds for your viewing pleasure. Without further ado, let's jump right in. Let's begin with the Soldier of Dogshit. What is there to say about this wet noodle farce of a battle? I understand it's meant to be the tutorial's end cap, but there's plenty of examples in the FromSoft boss catalog of challenging and engaging bosses that are also intuitive for learning's sake. Here you have a dude that is exactly like the other soldiers from the previous room, but with a boss health bar. I suppose you could point at Sekiro's tutorial mini-boss meant to teach you deflections and posture breaks, but even that guy would dunk all over this pathetic excuse for a boss. Complete F tier quality and difficulty. I really hope this is a placeholder for something greater in the full release. And so we come once again to the Tree Sentinel, the boss that you'll encounter just as you walk out of the tutorial area. He starts off with a rear and a swipe. I start off with a scream of my own from another boss using my Faith build. And the reason I started with that was so you can see it does about 400 damage, takes a ton of FP, maybe about half the bar. Then there's this attack, Beast Claw. It takes almost no FP. It does about 60% of the damage. It has a way shorter windup. It has incredible range. Get parried, get Beast Clawed. This thing is redonkulous. It has no business doing as much damage as it does with that range, with that FP cost. It is absurd. It is broken, no doubt about it. It's not that I want magic to be weak, but God, look at this. You can charge it from so far away at homes. It has a huge cone. It's just, there's no downside. I feel bad because, I encourage you if you really want to see the meat of this boss to watch my other video, because goodness gracious, this thing just absolutely destroys. I finished him off with the Bleed Dagger because I used it simply to riposte for the bonus damage. Didn't need to riposte here, all I needed was Beast Claw, baby. Let's go. If you want a comparison between Faith and Magic, in addition to why the Beast Claw is so ridiculous, the charge up and recovery period on the Carrion Piercer is comparable, if not a bit longer. The FP cost is higher, the range is shorter, and it does less damage. It's point blank inferior to its Faith counterpart, still powerful sure, but a lot more balanced. If you can't do absurd damage, being able to stagger the Sentinel is a huge boon. While you can parry, jump attack, and heavy attack with lighter weapons, heavier arms stagger him faster while hitting harder. Focusing on the Sentinel himself, his spear attacks are well telegraphed, his combos offer solid but learnable mix-ups, and his shield bashes and magic deflections provide him commendable defense. His biggest advantages are twofold, his mobility and his range. His horse provides him with great ability to rush in and out of range, while he can outspace you with the length of his axe. To master this battle, you'll need to keep an eye on his horse's stance, if he's reeling his shield arm, and patiently waiting for the shoulder shrug on the axe arm that signifies brief reprieve in his assaults. Since he's an optional world boss, you do have the option of leaving him for later when you've got your own horse. Engaging him in jousting is surprisingly effective, however, he seems programmed to use shield bashes to stun you both, bringing your mobility to a halt and quickly killing it as an option. To make the most of horse combat, you'll need to mimic his drive-bys and keep your greed in check, lest you be knocked down to almost certain death. For what amounted to the real tutorial boss of the network test, he had incredible versatility. The Sentinel pushes the player hard from the get-go with excellent design, earning an A grade for quality, with the tough push on early resources with a wide kit being enough to get an above average B for difficulty. And so we come to the boss that I mentioned with that face spell, Flying Dragon AGHEEL. This is a very, very cool spectacle fight from just a sheer awe standpoint. It's very cool to be on horseback fighting a dragon. How it works in practice, it's a little janky. I mean, the horse combat in the game entirely is pretty jank, in my opinion. Maybe not everybody will agree with that. It all centers around where you're homing in on, and as you can see, the camera the way it shakes and everything is just a little weird and wonky. You just hear drunkenly swinging around this giant sword, trying to hit his head that... It's not very much like what I consider to be by far the best dragon boss in the series, which is Dark Eater Midir. Midir has a tendency to reset every time he does an attack. He does a really big, scary attack, but then he resets, and he gives you a good opportunity to punish by hitting the head. This attack actually is similar to Nameless King's Wyvern, and that if he breathes a fire, you can get a close-in attack, so I did recognize that, but yeah, I found he didn't reset his head that often, and instead I had to, like, swing around like a dope and just hope for the best, but as you can see, it worked. And are we gonna take the riposte? Hell no! We're gonna do our big magic whirligig slam that does a ton of damage. You'll see more of it later. Like, it may seem like it's pretty meaty on him, but just you wait, It's really good. Anyway, I found of the builds I did of magic, of faith, and of strength, this was definitely by far the best. In fact, on my faith build, I actually had to switch to a different weapon because the dagger had such short range that it was a huge problem. Well, this, I pretty much could just home on the head and kind of wonkily float around on my horse, swinging the sword like a dope, and get some hits. Pretty much as long as you can read what he's gonna do. If he rears the head to the right, he's gonna swing to the left. If he... okay. Yeah, you can see what I mean a little bit about the jank. Who knows what he's doing right now? We're homed on the head, we're going in for it. This is one of the ways he'll breathe fire. He'll fly really far back, and then he'll do a horizontal sweep from where he is, so you just kind of need to get out of the way and then go back in to punish. Typically, if you're really far away, he does this fire breath, so one thing you can do to bait it out is stay at range and then zoom in with the horse, get close, and that is easily the best way to get a lot of hits on the head. I feel like I'm about to break his posture again because he's really close. He'll do this, he'll jump back and then jump to you. He also does a thing where he jumps back and he'll breathe fire, and that's the third way of the three that he breathes fire, but the only thing that's fire here is this riposte, bitch. Let's go! I think that's the same riposte animation from Midir. I'm not totally sure, but it looks really similar. My overall impressions of AGHEEL are rather mixed. The spectacle is spectacular, and it works well enough in practice to be enjoyable. That said, his positioning against your steed movement feels less based on your own strategic thought and more wildly spinning circles around his head and hoping for the best. At least the Beast Claw takes a hit due to a weakness I'll show in more detail shortly, but suffice it to say it has a big drawback when in water. I'm sure long-range magic would be more effective, but that would also leave you susceptible, assuming you stay toward his front to hit the head. I really wish he did have a similar head reset mechanic between attacks compared to Midir. It would have put more emphasis on making clever movements in and out of range at the right timings with the horse. As it stands, I can't give this C-tier brawl a higher quality grade due to its jank. Difficulty earns a C as well. Sure, AGHEEL hits hard, but he'll hardly ever hit you as long as you camp under his chest and avoid his obvious fire telegraphs. And now we're gonna go on an alphabetical tour of all the mini-bosses that you could find around the world. Think of it similar to Sekiro's mini-boss system to the boss system. There are foes, which are mini-bosses, and then there are greater foes, which are the traditional style bosses in the game. The difference in this is that everyone gets that named health bar, so I think there's a little bit of misconception that you should be expecting a full-fledged boss experience from these. I think of these more like very unique enemies with a few, you know, interesting design tricks that make them stand out, but not necessarily the most memorable. I did quite like this guy because in this I fought him with my strength build. I actually played as the Bloody Wolf, and this was the first thing I did. I left, I didn't fight the Tree Sentinel, I went straight to this guy, and I found it a pretty interesting test of your guard counter. In fact, I would say, compared to the Soldier of Godric, this is the guy you should have tested your guard counter against. If you'll notice, he has a number of different combos that range from 1 to 2 hits to maybe, I think there's like a 5-hit wombo combo, but he gives you a good opportunity to parry if you're feeling bold. He helps you emphasize the blocking. Here comes that wombo combo. And then if you are smart about your positioning like I was there, you miss all of those crazy attacks. You don't have to block them. And then if you just take the last hit with your shield, you can do the guard counter, which helps to break his stamina. Or sorry, his poise. Enemy poise, posture, what have you. Here I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna run away, he's gonna hit, and I'm gonna do the counter. The only thing I did notice is I feel like I did a lot of the guard counters, and it really took a long time to break his posture. I was like very adamant that I didn't want to do anything else. I didn't want to parry. I didn't want to just take, you know, whacks at him. I was like, no, I want to get the guard counter and riposte so I can show it off. And am I gonna get it? No, I'm still not gonna get it, but I know I am gonna get it because this is me from the future. Hell yeah, baby. Pretty simple boss, but I think he had a cool moveset. I really liked it. It was a good little Bon Appetit starter to a lot of mini bosses we're about to show. Speaking of show and tell, I can now easily illustrate Beast Claw's one odd weakness. Since the range relies on running across the ground in a wave, water seems to completely nullify this benefit. It instead only works as an extremely close range hit. Even so, all you need to do is bait the boss to a grounded area and you're golden. What's really overpowered against smaller enemies lacking great poise is a stun lock. Both the Beast Claw and Carrion Piercer are capable of chaining multiple devastating hits into an already meager HP pool. At least when you employ physical arms, you're in more of a dance to dodge, parry, guard break, and jump attack to break posture. Magic gets the benefit of strength stuns and a robust range kit for your other spells. As for the boss himself, his long combo strings, high aggression, and quick closing speed are countered by his lack of poise, limited HP pool, and large recovery on his attack chains, earning him a D for difficulty. Even so, I feel this balanced boss design is great for an early mini-boss, garnering him a B in quality. So you know how I told you could stunlock the Beastman with magic? Yeah, you can stunlock the Bloodhound too. Yeah, you can see it does a lot of damage. Yeah, he has 1 HP left. Yeah, I try to block, I whiff, but doesn't really matter. He has like 1 HP. We just gotta hit him with the spear one more time. It might be overkill, but we're gonna do it. Nah, you know what? Nah, we're gonna use magic. We're gonna use that rapid fire magic like a little range bitch. Yes, we are. Yes, sir. Get dead. As shown here, he is highly susceptible to knockdowns from heavy hits, not to mention his Fated Spawn-In allows you to get a huge hit in at the start for no cost. Despite his speed and gap closing ability, his largely telegraphed blows are easy to dodge as long as you keep your greed in check. His bleed makes him dangerous to block, but his glass cannon nature will almost certainly be outpaced due to his paltry health pool, worth the D in difficulty. Sadly, I can't say his quality is any different. This fight is over before you can really appreciate it. Next up is the WATCHDOG, this really creepy gargoyle sort of statue that really unsettling. So I'm gonna try to use that, wombo combo spin that I mentioned from AGHEEL, but you're still not seeing the full potential, just trust me. I tried to get it off. I do like that since there's a lot of really powerful large wind-up attacks in this game with the weapon arts and everything, I do like that he seems to have a way to counter that with the swings and everything. He's fast enough that you can't just get behind him and, swiggity swooty smack that booty like it's free. Really not the most complicated moveset. He does have like a thrust forward to get you a range. He can breathe fire forward, which is pretty neat. He has his slam downs. He has his jumps, which those are the ones that really creep me out. He sort of just floats up in the air. I don't like it, but he's dead, so we don't gotta worry about it now, do we? I like that his fire breath, swipes, thrusts, sweeps, and slams keep weapon arts and big magic windups in check. His ability to counter those powerful parts of your kit is respectable, but a lot of them leave him open to more modest quick attacks. These are more than enough against a mini-boss, especially when you consider that ranged tactics still work well. All that said, I can't say that he was very memorable. Whenever I feel lost on where to rank something, it typically means it didn't polarize me well one way or the other, earning him bog standard C's for both grades. Next up, we're gonna come to a mini-boss that I call the Colossal Golem because of a few bosses we'll see on today's list. He doesn't have an actual name title plate at the bottom, which leaves up in the air whether this is really a boss, but he is a singular, unique enemy you fight, and I wouldn't say he's any less unique than any of the mini-bosses I've shown so far. But unfortunately, the strength weapon just kind of wrecked his shit. I think you're intended to fight him on horseback and run away to outspace some of his attacks. I'll show you some of the more dangerous ones. But yeah, I'm able to get that riposte and then do my spinny slam, and he dead. Some of his more dangerous attacks sans steed include lava vomit at his feet and a big slam underneath himself. These get off me abilities with immediate range and the lack of lock on below the waist really suggest horseback was the intended way to fight. I appreciate their attempts to add bosses for that playstyle, but am not sold on them as more than a gimmick so far. The fight is over far too quickly with boomer bust attacks from the golem that almost immediately pass or fail you. Hardly worth more than a D in both categories. So in contrast to what I showed in my last boss video where this fight was pretty chaotic, I want to show you how the stealth system can be in this game, and also finally show you how hard this wombo combo hits. That's a one-shot, baby. I mean, to be fair, I think this boss is specifically designed to trap you in this little small cave. They have a lot of smaller enemies to gangbang you, and then these two faster, bigger, more tough bosses are supposed to also help and, railing you, but if you can stealth through it, you're totally fine, especially if you have such a strong weapon art. The thing is, the stealth in this fight really wasn't consistent. Like, typically this guy would run over to me. I don't know why all the other enemies ran and he's just like a dope over here in the corner, but one shot to you too, baby, goodbye. There's very little to elaborate on. Their movesets are fast and relatively high damaging. Even so, they're a joke to handle one-on-one. The C tier difficulty here is solely earned by sheer numbers overwhelming you sometimes. The stealth's inconsistencies allow for some fights to be hilariously easy, as I showed, while others have you getting mobbed by 2 bosses and half a dozen enemies at the same time. The design here is clear. Trap you in with enemies and see how you deal with it. Different builds will handle this differently with their crowd control options. Beastclaw suffers due to the water everywhere, but when it hits, GG. Magic is feasting, and the wide swings of the greatsword were perfect for mowing through mobs. I find it hard to give more than a D for quality because this mosh pit feels mostly thoughtless, even if it does force some strategy from the player. Alright, I've been showing off a little bit of the magic, a lot of the strength. I haven't been showing too much of the faith build because I really gotta tell you, Beastclaw is just stupid broken. Look at how far I can charge that up away from. Look at how far it goes behind him. If that even touched him a little bit, he doesn't take reduced damage. Nah, he takes the full kit and caboodle, which, as you can see, is a hefty chunk of his HP. This guy is definitely what I would consider, like, I think in typical Dark Souls, he could be a guy you might find just like at the end of a dungeon who's blocking like a Titanite chunk early in the game or something like that. He's got a pretty good string of combos he can enrage here, but because his combos are so consistent, makes it pretty easy to parry him, and of course using the Beastclaw makes it super free. All the Grave Warden has going for his F tier difficulty are his long, consistent combo strings. This relentless pressure makes him seem tough on the surface. In actuality, it makes him extremely predictable. Parries are easy to execute, his lack of significant range gives you the space advantage to use ranged abilities, and his enrage is an afterthought that doesn't alleviate existing weaknesses. I feel bad giving so many mini-bosses the quality D, but they need to show more than a few one-note tricks to stand out as average and beyond. Next up is another mini-boss that does not have a title, the Lion Guardian. You find him toward the end after beating Margit and getting access to Stormvale Castle. You saw me try an attempt there to use the Glintstone Arc weapon art, which is ridiculously OP. It comes from one of the mini-bosses we've already killed. I believe it's the WATCHDOG, and it's stupid good. It's the same homing soul arrow that it's always been, but the fact you can use it as a weapon art and not have to have it take one of your attunement slots is pretty ridiculous, especially when you consider how much damage it does. Fortunately for this guy, he didn't get too trivialized by it because he's got pretty quick movements, and you do have to pay a lot of attention to what he does because sometimes he moves really fast, really aggressively. Other times he's got some longer windups that can kind of trick you, lull you into thinking you have the advantage when you really don't. But I do imagine this guy is meant to guard some area we're gonna get access to behind me. If you look through that doorway, there's a couple like suits of armor in there, and then there's this door that if you hit it, your sword doesn't reflect off of it. So I think it's a new area because if you look at the map too, I think there's like a bridge. Yeah, I tried to do the guard counter there, but he's able to move back just enough that it still gives him like the spacing advantage. I like that. It was clever. It made you really have to think more about what you needed to do, which in turn I'm calling myself a dummy because I clearly didn't think that hard. As I try here, and I'm like, no, okay, you know what, I learned, you saw it, I learned. And he's down. The Lion's quick movements and excellent use of outspacing the player often put you at a disadvantage. His quick mix-ups are the cherry on top that makes split-second decision-making key to whittling away his HP safely. He gets even more help from being behind the toughest enemy section of the network test without a checkpoint, draining your resources before you even begin. The one thing working against his favor is the stealth approach. With a large attack like the Greatsword Spin to win, you could shave off almost half his health before the battle even began. Every build may not be able to deal that much singular damage, still it's an undeniable advantage that is a cinch to pull off. For that, his difficulty averages out to a C, though everything great he has going for him is worthy of a B in quality. Perhaps even an A if they flesh out his moveset a bit and stick him behind a fog gate to remove the stealth opener. This guy in here was redonkulous in my first playthrough. I debated including him in my first boss video, but because he didn't have a name, that's kind of my, you know, go-to way of determining things. But as you saw there, it was almost like he was supposed to have a cutscene, and then it just skips it on its own. It's pretty weird. The reason this guy is so difficult is he's very, very similar to the guy you see in the trailer, and then he's just got like all these crazy strikes, spins that move so fast. Almost feels too fast for what you're able to handle. I mean, that's where blocking comes in. That's where the very OP magic comes in. That's where the wombo combo slam comes in, and a heavy strength weapon that just does a good amount of damage. The small arena you're trapped in really highlights your ability to properly space yourself in enough range to dodge effectively, but also quickly counter when you have an opening. How you do so is very dependent on build. Melee without heavy armor is a scary proposition, while Magic and Faith are still OP unless you get really unlucky with his aggression. He's one of those bosses that kicked my teeth in the first time, then became a lot more predictable on subsequent runs. That initial burst of difficulty and crazy combos that can get you off guard is worth a B in difficulty, though I can't say its design is wildly unique or interesting beyond an average C in quality. Now we come to a boss that might be a bit familiar to longtime fans of the series, not as if this specific boss has ever existed before, but he's got a pretty signature helmet that a good friend once wore. As for the boss himself, the nod is cool, and he's about to give me the nod with that big head slam. Twice, by the way, which I actually find it funny that when he slams the head, you do less damage if you hit like the armored head. It's pretty nice. Otherwise, he mostly just has really brutish swings. They have long windups with pretty fast deliveries, so it can be a little demanding of the player. But as you see, like most mini-bosses, he has pretty low health compared to the offense that you can output, and you end up stunning him pretty quickly, and then bada bing, bada boom, you're dead. Pumpkinhead's brazen, hefty strikes and headbangs hit hard and have long windups with fast delivery, making them harder to counter than usual. He's surprisingly fast for his size too, making charge attacks and magic less easy to use. Still, those advantages were diminished in the face of your damage and his small health pool. He's memorable for the lovable NPC nod, but his design and difficulty don't stand out far from the C average. Alright, now pull up a seat because this one is gonna take a little bit of time. Now, it's like 2 minutes, but still, for a mini-boss, it's a good amount of time. Probably the most disappointing design in the network test, I say only because the design of the giants is amazing. They've finally managed to get right fighting a giant, something they've struggled to do for multiple games. It feels really good in this game. I love that you can block his attacks. I love that you can lock onto his legs or his torso. I love that he has a weak spot in his head that he'll make vulnerable if you're able to block or roll through certain attacks that he does. There's a lot of really cool aspects to his design. Now, this is really just one of the giants from the overworld, but his gimmick is that because he has this sort of Stone Fang Tunnel Demon Soul style thing going on, he has hard skin that makes it more difficult to do combos. Basically, your melee weapons will deflect off of it. So when I walked into this for the first time, there were tons of signs on the ground saying, use magic, use magic. Well, I kind of didn't want to use magic because I'd heard it was so ridiculously OP after I'd finished the closed network test, so nah, I kind of wanted to use the sword, which granted it is a magic-infused sword, but hey, it's supposed to be a little bit harder. I wanted to, you know, get some meat out of this mini-boss, and I did. He railed me pretty good, as you could see. As you'll see after this footage, you will note that my other builds, they wrecked this dude. They wrecked him pretty good. That's why I'm showing this footage, because legitimately I don't think you get to see any moveset whatsoever were I to use those, but I'll show you some of that in a second. Anyway, let's rail him real quick. Let's get that victory so we can move on to those one-sided spankings and then to the final boss of the network test. As you can see, this dope always opens with a roar, giving you free damage to start. That's a nice chunk for the Beast Claw, especially when he follows up with little offense as you keep chipping away. As for my greatsword, I assumed it wouldn't do much since the enemies with similar defensive advantages seemed resistant. That was a miscalculation on my part. He got absolutely obliterated by the weapon art. As a boss, I gotta be harsh with the grade. He's a reskin of an existing enemy that is regularly used in the overworld. Those enemies have A-tier design and difficulty for standard mobs, but as a reused boss, he barely scrapes a D for difficulty taking into account non-magic builds, and is F-tier recycled giant doo-doo with a lame gimmick. So, I've talked a lot about Beast Claw. I've talked a lot about how Beast Claw is OP, how it has too much range, how it needs some balancing. Well, you can see the range is pretty good there. It's pretty hard on what is pretty unanimously considered to be the hardest boss in the network test. I I really want you to be the deciding factor here. You, the viewer, I want you to watch this fight. And I want you to think about how satisfying this would feel for you to execute, to try your best to outrange the boss, use extra heals you get from Faith, and then just do your best to use a Beast Claw from range and not have to deal with any of his crazy wombo combos. Then I'm gonna show you what I did with my strength build, and I'm gonna let you decide which looks more satisfying. You'll just have to see. I mean, it's already nuts that with the Beast Claw alone, look at that. While he's charging up, I'm able to just get more free damage because he stays there for a second. If you were in a melee build, it would be so risky to run and be up in his face, but nope, just free. Just sit back and use your extremely far range Beast Claw. Go at it again, up, just roll back. Is he gonna, oh, he's gonna do a slam. That's definitely free. That's got a large recovery. There's another Beast Claw. And, oh, he actually got me, but what is he gonna do? Is he gonna do anything crazy? Nope, long wind up. That's unfortunate for you. I'm gonna try to heal. I got it. Ooh, long wind up, long recovery. Beast Claw, baby. It just doesn't feel the same as getting up real close and tangling with the boss. I feel like one of the most satisfying things when it comes to bosses in FromSoft's games is when you have those humanoid enemies that have those really aggressive movesets, and you have to pull out all the stops to fight them. Well, when your one stop is just a ranged OP attack, it's disappointing. I want magic to be viable, I do. I don't want them to ruin magic, but take away one of that thing's strengths. Get rid of the range, get rid of the FP cost to make it stronger. I mean, do something with it. But we're moving on, whatever. Have faith in Faith if you want to. I have faith in my big ass greatsword and my parry skills, as you're about to see. Nah, let it be theDeModcracy, the dude who's about to drop his nutsack on your fucking face, Margaret. That was very aggressive, I'm sorry. Let's fight him. Let's fight him. Gonna take out the two-hander, gonna try and see if I can get my little whirligig wombo on him. Mumbo jumbo wombo thumbo. That doesn't make any sense, but it was nice damage. You see, that did about as much as the Beast Claw for a lot more risk. Ooh, just stand in. You missed the first parry. Have courage. Strike him and get that one too. Now you'll see what I noted. If you strike him, he does a second attack. Strike him when he gets up. Attack. Strike him. He's gonna do another attack. Boom! Chain those parries, baby. And look how low his HP before he's even gotten access to phase 2. Normally he goes around 70%. Not on my watch. Take that big hefty damage, and then boom, you're dead. That is satisfying to execute. When you've crafted a build, put it together, you know your game plan, you want to execute it, and it's more than just, I'm gonna roll and run away as far as I can and use a ranged spell that's OP. It's satisfying. There were 4 parries in there were weapon arts in there was two-handing, there was one-handing, all my hands were getting shoved far up his butt. It was fantastic. My choice is obvious. I find the range strategy lame and boring, while the up-close and personal style is thrilling, engaging, and makes the most of what Margit has to offer. Don't even get me started on trying this in co-op. I won't pretend like split aggro hasn't always made using summons in these games broken in the player's favor. That makes it all the worse how easy it is to monotonously chip away from a distance. At least when solo, ranged tactics are punishable by his jumps and throwing daggers if poorly timed. Even if your choice of tactics may make Margit easier, he still has enough offensive presence to earn today's singular A grade in difficulty. The erratic nature of his combo strings, slow mix-ups, and unexpected follow-ups with weapons he pulls out of thin air are daunting, especially since your only tell is reading an empty offhand, and his damage is tremendous compared to all but AGHEEL, who has trouble hitting you. That's not a problem for Margit. I'm really interested to see where he's placed in the proper game. I could easily see this being a mid-game boss considering his difficulty. As for quality, he felt like a boss in the truest sense compared to the other 13 I showcased today. He has some of Gale's and Fried's flavor from Dark Souls 3 with his intensity, and I love how imposing he is in the cutscene with the power to back it up in combat. His music and voice acting were phenomenal, the variety of combos and conjured weapons was fantastic, he highlights the emphasis on posture breaking, and in spite of his aggressive style, leaves proper openings once you learn to read his different attacks. This S-tier bout felt like the greatest playground for everything the combat system added to FromSoft's glowing formula, one that I can't wait to see in all of its glory in less than 2 weeks. Until then, hopefully this greater look at Elden Ring's network test bosses and mini-bosses will hold you over. I'm already preparing myself for the massive rankings this game could produce. It's gonna be a great time. Be sure to subscribe to stay tuned, leave a like if you enjoyed the video, and of course, I want to thank you for watching today, much love to you, and I'll see you in the next video.